Let's talk for a bit about how we can use FE geometry to create connections between our meshes, be they 2D meshes that are far apart or 3D meshes where we want to connect one solid to another without using contact. So FE geometry is a way to get new tools for working with elements into your toolkit. What it does is it takes all the tools that you would normally be able to use on surfaces, such as patch, split, etc., and it lets you use those on elements. So we can take those nice patch tools and use them to patch gaps between elements. FE Geometry has a good article in the help, so that's a good reference for you. And then of course you can always go to the tool, Geometry, FE Geometry, and check out some of the videos that we have here. FE Geometry is particularly good at taking orphan elements and allowing you to edit them, orphan elements being elements without surfaces and solids associated to them. And so you can see in this little video that you take those orphan elements, convert them to FE geometry, and then they have green and red lines, and those are our topology viewing lines. So red is free edges and green is shared edges. So let's look at how we can use these tools in our modeling. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mesh these two surfaces, and ultimately I want to connect them together. So there's one surface, here is another. And to convert them into FE geometry, I go to the Geometry tab, FE Geometry. These are not orphan elements. They have CAD associated, so I do from CAD, and I click on these components, and I click Convert. And now I have FE Geometry. And one of the ways we can confirm that is by going to Update, and if you can click on some of the elements here, then you have FE Geometry. FE Geometry has some interesting quirks to it. One of the interesting quirks is that if you delete one of these elements, that element now sort of represents the surface. So you can see that I'm deleting the surface underneath it as well. So keep that in mind as you're working with FE Geometry. If you want to go back and forth between FE Geometry and normal elements, the way to do that is to change your selection to surfaces, select all the surfaces, and click delete. And so now we have deleted the surfaces, but not the elements. So that's how you can go back and forth. In our case, let's use FE Geometry to connect these two meshes. They're back to FE Geometry right now, and I can go to the Surfaces Patch tool, and I'll give it a go, but I don't think it's going to work so well. Click all these lines and try and patch them together, and it didn't quite work in this case. So that one thing we can do to improve this patch is to go to Split, and we're going to split this surface down the middle by clicking on this point. So now I got a little point there. Now I can do patch between a couple of these lines, and it's going to work out better. So this is an example of how patch can benefit from using the split tool to parse up your model. So it's created these elements in the middle. They're not always the best quality because we're just doing more of an STL-like mesh. So if you want to fix elements in the middle, you can just use your rebuild tool and fix the mesh that way. Now let's talk about how FE geometry can be used to connect solid meshes together. In this case, I want to make the yellow box meshed, and I'm going to make the blue box meshed, and I want them to fit together without using any kind of contact or other methods of connection. I just want the nodes to be connected. To do that, I'm going to copy some of the nodes on the yellow face to the blue face, and I'm going to use FE geometry to stitch all of the blue elements together. So we'll go to Tep Mesh, we'll mesh this solid. These are 3D elements, so let me extract 2D elements from the faces of this. So now in red, using the Faces tool, we have 2D elements. And I can select all of these elements that are 2D, Control-C, Control-V. So these are now duplicated elements, but that's what we want in order to mesh the big blue solid. So hiding a bunch of things. In fact, hiding the big cube as well. So we're left with these duplicate elements, and these happen to be FE geometry because they're orphaned elements. They're not associated to any solid. I can verify that using FE geometry update, and these elements are selectable. I can also go to split or some other way of viewing by topology and see that there are red edges on the outside of these elements. What I'm going to do is I'm going to organize this surface, because it's a surface, it's FE geometry. going to organize this into the big cube component. And then I'm going to start meshing the outside of the cube. I should say box, not cube. There we go, so that part's meshed. These elements need to be converted to FEGeom as well. So FEgeometry from CAD, convert. So I'll hide this surface so I can select the elements better. And then I'll go to the patch tool. It's very important to go to the hamburger menu and make sure the suppress common edges box is unchecked for this use case. That way we're going to be able to keep the edges that are defining our interface with the yellow tech mesh. Then I click these edges, click these, and just sort of wrap it all up. I find it's very useful when using patch to do it in small chunks as opposed to doing it all at once. So there we go. We have 2D elements. And then I can make that a 3D mesh by going to Tetra, going by component, mesh that volume. And then just to make sure I did get 3D elements, I'll hide those. Looks like I did get 3D elements. So showing all of our elements again, we should be able to click Validate, Free Edges, and Preview Equivalents, and we'll see that there are these golden nodes at the interface nodes, indicating that they are within our tolerance value, and we can click Equivalents to tie it all together. So I can click an element over here and do Select Adjacent, Control J, and then we should see that these are all connected. Excellent. Lastly, if you don't want 2D elements wrapping up all of your solid elements, one thing you can do to get rid of those 2D elements is you can do Select by Advanced, by Config, and then you can click the Ctria3s and delete them as you will. So that is another way that we have to connect our solids together. It's a little bit of a more manual way, but it gives you really fine control over that mesh interface. So it's a useful tool to learn and can be pretty fun for making those more tricky connections.